Hi friends, I'm going to take you through a study that contains a significant amount of information. And I know that there are going to be some of you who are going to say, show me in the Bible where it says this. No. Some of that I'm going to be able to do, and some of it I'm not going to be able to do. It's just knowledge gained through lots and lots of study. Types and shadows, understanding what we're supposed to about the law as a foreshadow of Christ, but also understanding that the things in the garden were foreshadows of what would be written into the law, which would also be foreshadows of Christ. Because there's a first Adam and a second Adam. And there's a lot of things that are not going to come out in the plain text and say, this is the day that this happened. You're supposed to understand that based on scriptural study. So please don't say, where in the Bible does it say this? Because I'm going to ignore it. What I'm going to do is take you through a lot of information, like I said, and we're going to start with this chart that I have. It's called... Oh, well, this is the Excel version because I want to parse it down into a different format rather than just the PDF. So I am looking on academia real quick. It's called How Long Adam and Eve Were in the Garden. So what we have is a whole bunch of plain text, just normal common sense day counting from day one, month one, the days of creation, and how long Adam and Eve, typologically speaking, we can ascertain they were in the wedding chamber and how it relates to Christ. So this is going to be relevant to what I'm going to go through, and I'm going to start here from creation, and we're going to work our way through understanding what the purpose of specifically the trumpet and the Feast of Trumpets were supposed to foreshadow when they were written into the law. Because this is actually contained, the understanding of this is contained in the very first verses of the Bible. So in Genesis 1, and I'm going to open my Bible, which I have right in front of me, and I'm going to read along. Maybe. All right. Need to move some stuff around here. Okay, in Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, darkness was upon the face of the deep. The Spirit of God moved over the face of the waters, and God said, let there be light. This is month 1, day 1 of creation. In the beginning, you start at the beginning, the first day of the first month. This is easy. What actually surprises me significantly is that there are a lot of people who will say that man was created on Tishri 1. That's not the first day of creation, folks. The first day of creation was when God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw light that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and evening and morning were the first day. I will invite you to realize that Tishri 1, which is the first day of creation, is what the Feast of Trumpets, the day that the Feast of Trumpets is celebrated on. There is a reason for that. We're going to get into that. But day 1 of creation is, in fact, Tishri 1 in Genesis 1. Day 2. God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters. Let it divide the waters from the waters. Just to note, firmament is empty space. God made the firmament, divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. God called the firmament heaven, empty space. And the evening and morning were the second day. And God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. And just to note, this is the reason why day 3, or Tuesday, is why the Jews believe it's like the best day for weddings. Because the third day, which is Tuesday, the third day of the week, which is Tuesday, God saw that it was good twice. And God said, let the earth bring forth grass and herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth. And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind. And God saw that it was good for the second time. Evening and morning were the third day. So we're going to skip ahead to day 6. I think you get the point by now. So day 6, what does he do? Verse 24, God said, let the earth bring forth a living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping things and beasts of the earth after his kind, and it was so. God made the beasts of the earth after his kind, the cattle after their kind, everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind, and God saw that it was good. And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, over the cattle, over all of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So God created man in his own image, and the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, the fowl of the air, over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree in which the fruit of a tree yielding seed. And it is the fruit of a tree yielding seed to you, it shall be for meat. And to every beast of the earth, to every fowl of the air, to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat. And it was so. God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. So we have the first day of creation, let there be light, and there was light. God saw the light was good. God divided the light from the darkness. He called it the light day. Evening he called night. Evening and morning were the first day. Okay? That's when God began his creative process. What you note about Leviticus 23 is that it is a memorial, a remembrance. It's my academia page. We don't want to go there. We want to go here. Leviticus 23. Leviticus 23, and we're going to go to verse 23. The Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, saying, in the 7th month, in the first day of the month, ye shall have a Sabbath, a memorial of blowing of trumpets, and holy convocation. Ye shall do no servile work therein, but ye shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord. And the reason this is in the 7th month, in the first day of the month, is because God, in Exodus 12, reestablished the beginning of months to the head of the year as Nisan, Abib, rather than Tishri. So what had been month 7 became month 1, and what had been month 1 became month 7. It was written into the law as a memorial to day 1 of creation, where the voice of the trumpet, Jesus, spoke creation into existence. There is some reason, and I don't know what that reason is, but that people don't recognize in the New Testament when the trumpet imagery is presented, it's always, just about always, going to be a voice. I want to actually prove this to you guys. We'll start with trump. Because sometimes it's called trumpet, sometimes it's called trump. So I'll get both words here. So like here in Matthew 6, it's talking about an actual trumpet. Therefore, and how people were like, hey, look at me, I did a good thing. Don't be like that. Matthew 24:31 is actually the voice of Jesus. He shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet. The great sound of a trumpet is actually also in Revelation 1:10. I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day and heard behind me a great voice as of a trumpet talking with me. And he turned around and he saw a vision of the glorified Christ. In Revelation 4:1, it's also the voice of Jesus. After this, I looked, and behold, a door was open in heaven. The first voice which I heard was as it were of a trumpet talking with me, which I come up hither, and I will show thee things which must be hereafter. That's Jesus. And then in Revelation, it's actually the voices of the 7 angels. They're given trumpets to sound. They're given the voices to sound judgments. It's not actual trumpet instruments that they're sounding. And this is actually made clear in this verse here. The 7 angels, which had the 7 trumpets, prepared themselves to sound. And then in Revelation 8:13, it says, woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth by the reason of the other voices of the trumpet of the 3 angels, which are yet to sound. So Revelation 8 talks about them being given their trumpets to sound. Revelation 8:6 talks about them actually preparing themselves to sound. And then Revelation 8:13 tells you it's their own voices. And then this is also talking about trumpet judgments, which are going to be the 6th angel, which had the trumpet. So that's a trumpet judgment, the voice of the angel, which has the trumpet judgment 6. And then Revelation 18 is talking about trumpeters. So that's actually someone who plays a trumpet, a musical instrument. So let's keep going back up here. And I just want to prove this to you, that the majority of the time when the word trump or trumpet is used in the New Testament, it's talking about a voice. Whether it's of Christ or an angel, it's usually talking about a voice. Now, this obviously is not. It's talking about those who would warn others of impending battle. For if the trumpet gave an uncertain sound, who shall prepare himself to the battle? So that's obviously talking about issuing a warning. 1 Corinthians 15:52 is talking about the voice of Jesus in the moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump. It's the last time the voice of Jesus will be used in the present dispensation, and it will be used to call to assembly. For the trumpet shall sound, the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. Now we know that this is the voice of Jesus because the very next time it's used is in 1 Thessalonians 4:16 to give context. The Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout. Yeah, the last trump. It's the last time the voice of Jesus is going to be used, and it's going to call to assembly with the voice of the archangel and with the trump of God. It's the voice of Jesus. So, part of the reason I'm doing this video is to disabuse people of this notion that somehow the rapture is going to be tied to the Feast of Trumpets and some last shofar blast in a sequence or something like that. Dudes, it's the voice of Jesus. Just like it was in Revelation 1:10, the great voice as of a trump, which is the same way it's going to be when he sends his angels with the great sound of a trumpet to gather the remnant from where they've been scattered at the second coming. It's the same trumpet that he talks with the voice of in Revelation 4:1. So why we don't understand that of these verses is beyond me, but please understand that of these verses going forward. And this is talking about the dispensation of the law on Sinai back in Exodus 19, which was given by angels. You can validate that it was given by angels. In Acts 7:53, I'm not going to go through this. Do your own homework. I'm going to give you the verses. And Galatians 3:18-ish, somewhere around there. And Hebrews 2:2. It tells you the law was given by the disposition of angels. So Hebrews 12:19, at the sound of the trumpet and the voice of the words, which voice they had entreated that the word should not be spoken to them anymore. I'm pretty sure that's talking about Sinai. So anyway, what I wanted to show you is that in the New Testament, almost all of the times, with the exception of 2 times, you're talking about the trumpet being synonymous with a voice. That is what the Feast of Trumpets memorialized, was a voice of a trumpet which spoke creation into existence beginning on Tishri 1, which at that time was day 1, month 1, and was later in Exodus 12, when the head of the year was changed to month 7, day 1, and thus written into the law as a memorial or a remembrance of something that had already happened. So let's go back here. Let's go back here to Leviticus 23. So now, if you didn't know that, now you do. That this is in Leviticus 23:23. Speak unto the children of Israel, verse 24, saying, in the 7th month, in the 1st day of the month, you shall have a Sabbath, a memorial, a blowing of trumpets, and holy convocation. A memorial is a remembrance of something that had happened in Israel's past. And to this point, the only thing that had happened in Israel's past was the giving of the law on Sinai, which is not what that is commemorating. It is commemorating something that happened on that day, which is Tishri 1, which is day 1 of creation. There are a fair few people who believe that the rapture of the church is going to be tied to Tishri 1 because they believe that that is the next outstanding festival to be fulfilled. Guys, it's a memorial. When it was given, it was a memorial. Not something that would be fulfilled in the future, although it does have an application. It was forward looking to the incarnation of the Creator God who would have the voice of the trumpet to minister to the people by. Hebrews 1 discusses that. God, who at sundry times and in diverse manners spake in time past unto the fathers by the prophets, hath in these last days spoken unto us by his Son. The voice of God is the trump of God on earth, whom he hath appointed heir of all things, and by whom also he made the worlds. It was always a memorial back to creation, day 1 of creation, which occurred on the day that the festival was held. Day 1 of creation, Tishri 1. But we need to understand that when it was given, it was a memorial to something that had already happened, which again is going to be creation. Day one. I'm harping on the point. There's a reason for that. I'm harping on the point. Please understand, it's already done. Already done. So when the law pointed to Christ, it was forward looking to the time when the Word, the one who spoke creation into existence, would become flesh and dwell among men. This is John 1. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God. The Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. Jesus is the creator who spoke creation into existence and incarnated to also be your Savior and your Redeemer. That is what the Feast of Trumpets memorialized, was day one of creation, where the Word began to speak creation into existence. So continuing along, this is not going to be in the Bible. So again, don't look for this. Don't ask me, where can I find this? You can't. What you understand of this is that there's a first Adam and a second Adam. And what applied to the second also applied to the first. The difference is that we get 7 days in the wedding chamber, and we get 7 years in the wedding chamber. He got a literal 7 days. There are some people who have said they believe that Adam and Eve were in the garden for 33 and a half years because they believe that Jesus was 33 and a half years old and the first Adam, second Adam were the same age. Guys, I got to tell you, that's ridiculous. If you give that any ounce of thought to perfect bodies in perfect union, created as adults and told to reproduce after your own kind, it wasn't going to take them 33 and a half years to have kids. In fact, it probably didn't even take them 1 year to have a child. It would be ridiculous. I'm not being condescending. I'm saying common sense here, folks. People who are made perfect and of age to procreate and given the command to do so are not going to take years to do that. Not even going to take months to do that. Adam and Eve would have had to have been in the garden for enough time for her to not have gotten pregnant, which would have been kicked out almost immediately. Their time in the garden would have been a literal 7 days. And this is where we get into typology of what happened in the garden would be written into the law once the head of the year was changed. So you have man created, and they were put in their wedding chamber for 7 days, Eden. So this is the 7 days that they have, and these are the days of creation, or the days after creation, just regular calendar days going on. So their 7 days would have come to an end, and the very next day is day 14. At this time, Tishri was month 1. What was written into the law on day 14 of the first month? Well, we just had the chapter up. In the 14th day of the first month at even is the Lord's Passover. This was written into the law as Passover because the first Passover occurred when God slew the lamb, shed the blood for the remission of sin, sacrificed it to clothe the shame of their nakedness. Yes, it was Tishri at that time, but it was the 14th day of the first month. Then the head of the year was changed in Exodus, and it was written into the law still that the 14th day of the first month, which is literally the day upon which the first Passover sacrifice occurred, was going to occur as an annual remembrance. And then obviously Jesus himself died on the 14th day of the first month also. There are so many types and shadows here. Now, this would also be day 8 of man's life. What was written into the law on day 8? Circumcision, required to be considered a seed of Abraham. This was required of Abraham after he believed God and it was counted to him for righteousness as a token of his faith in Genesis 17. It says, and ye shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin. It shall be a token of the covenant betwixt me and you. He that is 8 days old shall be circumcised among you, every man child in your generations. He that is born in the house or bought with money or of bought with money of any stranger, which is not of thy seed, etc. Then it was written into the law for Israel in Leviticus 12 that if a woman hath borne a male seed, she shall be unclean 7 days, and on the 8th day the flesh of his foreskin is circumcised. This was the circumcision of the flesh that Adam underwent. He lost his perfection. And on that day, the 8th day, where his flesh was circumcised, because he lost his perfection, and on the day that God offered the lamb for the remission of their sin and clothed the shame of that nakedness, which was foreshadowing of Jesus, but on that 8th day, man was kicked out of the garden. Okay? Jesus is the second Adam. Slightly less than 4,000 years later, on the very next day, Tishri 15, Jesus was born. So, aside from the 4,000-ish years in between, you have a seamless calendar date of Adam screwed up big time and got kicked out of the garden. And the next day, Jesus comes to give back what Adam lost. So, squeeze that gap, close that gap of thousands of years, and you have a seamless transition between sin entering the world and Jesus coming to make that sin better. Jesus was born on the first day of the Feast of Tabernacles. It is a 7-day festival. On the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin was circumcised. It's the 8th day assembly that was written into the law. He took on him the seed of Abraham. So in this chart that I put together, you have several foreshadows of the feasts forward looking to Christ. You have the Feast of Trumpets, which was the incarnation of the Creator God who began to speak creation into existence on Tishri 1. You have the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world, which is Passover. It's the day that Jesus was going to be the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. You have his birth on the first day of Tabernacles and his circumcision to take on himself the seed of Abraham on the 8th day. So now let's unhide this, and this is how that all works. But what I wanted to impress upon people is the importance of understanding that trumpets relate to the voice of Jesus and specifically to the ministry of Christ. When I did a word study earlier in the video, this actually occurred to me after the fact, and I wanted to bring it up again. So we're just going to find where we need to go. And for those of you who might not have seen that, but will see this, I want to show you the importance of understanding that the word Jubilee is not actually in Leviticus 25:9 and help you understand what it actually is. It's the Hebrew word teruah, which is associated with blowing of trumpets. Yom Teruah is the day of blowing. That's the Feast of Trumpets. It's called Yom Teruah. And so for those of you who don't know, the word Jubilee is not actually in Leviticus 25:9. It should say, then shalt thou cause the trumpet of the blowing to sound. On the 10th day of the 7th month, in the day of atonement, you shall make the trumpet sound throughout all your land. This word teruah is actually what should be there. And it's important to note that the trumpet in this context also is related to the voice of Jesus. How would you know that? Well, because let's go look up Hebrew 8643. So we'll go to we'll go to Blue Letter Bible. H86, 43. Okay, so this word teruah and all of the verses that it shows itself in. So I just expanded the page and made it easier to see. So we have this word teruah, H8643, and here is the verse that I brought up, Leviticus 25:9. Thou shalt cause the trumpet of the teruah blowing to sound on the 10th day of the 7th month and the day of atonement. You shall make the trumpet sound throughout all your land. The first verse that it occurs in at all, but the verse that you're going to take your reference point from is the verse before that, which is related to the Feast of Trumpets. Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, in the 7th month, in the 1st day of the month, ye shall have a Sabbath, a memorial of blowing of trumpets and holy convocation. What you are intended to understand from both of these verses, and again, I did a video earlier talking more about the context, so I'm not going to go over that again, But what you're supposed to understand about both of those verses is they relate to the ministry of Christ. You have the incarnation of the Creator God, whose ministry served to sound the trumpet. And then you have a specific day upon which the trumpet was supposed to sound. And that actually relates to the first day of Jesus's ministry, which is the Day of Atonement. Jesus became the scapegoat, which is a Day of Atonement Leviticus 16 event. And then as a result, he proclaimed, because the Spirit of the Lord anointed him to, it descended from heaven and abode upon him on that day after his baptism. It anointed him to preach good tidings unto the meek. Sent him to bind up the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance of the captives, the opening of the prison to them that are bound, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord. Both of these verses have everything to do with the ministry of Jesus Christ. On the whole, and the first day upon which the ministry of Christ served to begin to declare liberty via the forgiveness of sins. Very important to understand that the Feast of Trumpets is already, it was a foreshadow of Christ. It is not something outstanding, and it is certainly not related to the rapture. It was related to the ministry of Christ in its totality. The incarnation of the Creator God, who would have a ministry used to sound the trumpet, preaching the acceptable year of the Lord. And that was forward looking to triumphal entry day, the day upon which Israel had to accept her Messiah. She chose to reject him, and then 4 days later, he became the Lamb of God, which taketh away the sin of the world. I know this is like going to be banging my head against a wall to get people understand that the Feast of Trumpets has nothing to do with the rapture. It was forward looking to the ministry of Jesus Christ. The last trump is not related to the last trumpet blast that's going to sound on the Feast of Trumpets. It is the last time the voice of Jesus will be used in the present dispensation, and it will be used to call to assembly. In actual fact, the first time that Jesus's voice spoke in the present dispensation was also to call to assembly. It was to appear to Mary after he rose and tell her, go tell my disciples I'm going to appear to them in Galilee tonight. So the first time the trumpet was used, the voice of God was used in the present dispensation was after he rose. It was to call to assembly. And likewise, the last time that Jesus uses that voice in the present dispensation, it will also be to use to call to assembly. When Jesus met those who he had told her to tell to assemble, he breathed on them and they received the Holy Ghost. When he sounds the last trumpet, it's going to be to call to assembly all of those who he has gifted with said Holy Ghost. There are many types and shadows in the Bible. Prophecy is pattern. But simply because people are looking for a certain thing to mean a certain thing does not mean that it means that thing, and in fact, it does not. While I understand that there are two very specific questions that you could ask about the Feast of Trumpets as it relates to the rapture. Is it necessary that it must relate to that, or is it simply possible that it could relate to that? No, it is absolutely not necessary that it relates to that, because it related to a foreshadow of the Creator God having a ministry wherein he sounded his own voice, which is what the trumpet symbolizes. So no, it is not necessary that it relates to that at all. So then the question becomes, is it possible that it could relate to that? No, it is not, because that is not the time of the year that the rapture is going to occur. That is a separate conversation altogether. But I think half of the battle here is to help people understand what it actually pointed to, and that it has already been a foreshadow of Christ. There is nothing outstanding from the law to be fulfilled, not a single bit of it, including the feasts. And so it's necessary for people to understand how they were a foreshadow of Christ. I'm not going to use the word fulfilled. They were not fulfilled. They were foreshadows of Christ. And the specific Feast of Trumpets was a foreshadow of the ministry of the one who had the voice of the trumpet, who used it to speak creation into existence on the day that the feast was held, Tishri 1, day 1 of creation. No, it is not necessary that the rapture relate to the Feast of Trumpets. And it is also not going to relate to the Feast of Trumpets. If you guys have any questions, let me know. But I wanted to go through this because I think it's interesting, and I think that there's a whole lot of backstory here that we need to understand in order to stop the madness. Have a good day.